because this is something that not a lot of people are incredibly familiar with, the internet hardware as it stands today. I mean, do you guys know? I mean, let's say you want to send a packet to Europe. Do you know how it gets there?
No, all I know is it gets broken down into small blocks, and then it gets transferred over, and then it rebuilds it on the other side, and that's as far as my layman brain goes.
Hardware-wise, how do you think it gets there?
I got no fucking clue. Oh, cables in the ocean.
Cables in the ocean.
Cables in the ocean. There we go.
And I mean, there's the sharks in the ocean, aren't there? I mean, that's what I thought when I figured that out.
Big fucking squids. All sorts of shit in the ocean.
Okay, this is going to be incredibly reliable. And I talked to some of these technicians, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we do. I mean, they send scuba divers down there to pull this giant squid off the cables or whatever. Whatever. Oh yeah, they send scuba divers down there to repair these cables, and I mean, they have to have their locations highly secret because." If somebody knows where it is, and you create warfare, cable warfare, all those types of things.
That's got to be a dangerous job. That's the world's deadliest job there.
I think so.
Fighting off squids to clean off cables.
Think about that. That is so crazy to think that you're stringing a cable from this continent to Europe. Now, think about if that was visible, like if that was on a tower and they were able to string that up over the ocean somehow. Think about how bananas that is to think how fucking long that cable has to be. And honestly, our internet's pretty fast. It's not bad.
They're huge.
Holy shit.
Yay big.
So what is that? Just like a grouping of fiber optic cables? Just
I'm not entirely sure. I think it's coaxials, and I think there's multiple layers and multiple channels in the cable.
Yeah.
I think they're doing some FiOS, but I mean, FiOS in itself is most likely going to be a little more expensive to create. I mean, certain ones now. Here's the next part of it. Ready? So we got this rudimentary tech, which, comes from like the early 1900s when they're doing telegraph wires across. That's how they did it. And they just took a little, back then they were a little teeny string and they just rolled it across the ocean. So then the internet starts coming out and they're like, oh, okay, well, we need bigger and bigger cables to start making them. But now guess what the cost is to string one cable from here to Europe?
Probably ridiculous.
200 million.
Oh, very close. 300 million.
All right. Not bad.
So think about how many satellites we can put up for $300 million for one cable.
Especially cube satellites with...
Yep.
Yeah, multiple satellites in one launch, right?
And who owns these cables? Well, only companies that can afford it. So AT&T, all these other ones. Now, there's also notable issues like the latency issue between Japan and India. And I mean, even stringing up, those are $1.5 billion problem. I mean, even the latency from here to India is at least 200, 300 milliseconds sometimes. Now, that's with cables. Now, the thing about low Earth orbit is it's 90 miles plus. Your latency can be 50 milliseconds easily, 50 to 100, and you have it constant around the whole world because the satellite's constantly at the same height across the whole globe. You don't have to travel on the ground through these copper cables. And then the next thing, too, is getting all these other people wired up so that they basically can have access to this internet. It's got a massive material cost margin in it. And what has copper already done since we've seen the electric age coming out, the computing age, is we're starting to see more and more and more copper becoming more and more expensive. And where some people are literally buying that have owned old nuclear missile silos, they strip all the copper out of it and they make more money than the actual silo costs. Because, supply and demand, you have a higher demand for it. You have giant cables that are thousands and thousands of miles long. That's a lot of copper.
Yeah, once the crackheads in my neighborhood find out about that, they'll be scuba diving. They come after your pipes in town.
They're relentless, man. They'll steal the pipes out of your shower while you're bathing. We feel bad for them. That's a disease. We gotta help. We gotta help these people. We really do.